Donald Trump intends to give tax breaks to billionaires and big corporations. He intends to cut Social Security and Medicare. He intends to surrender our fight against the climate crisis, and he intends to end the Affordable Care Act. You know what? If you want Donald Trump to win, then say that, otherwise I'm speaking.
No, so bad. So bad, so bad. Oh, so bad. Oh, that's so bad. Oh, no. She's yelling at the Palestine protesters. Oh, no. Oh, no. In Michigan? You're yelling at the Palestine protesters in Michigan? No!
And I got yours.
How should she have responded?
The power
to be
is
like,
with
I hear
the
you.
people.
When I say we're not going back, I mean we're not going back to our old allegiances, allowing a country full of beautiful, brave people in Israel that I love, that I've defended my whole life, to be taken over by a right-wing charlatan like Benjamin Netanyahu, just like Donald Trump. They're so closely associated with one another because they're both right-wing and they're both crazy and they're both selfishly holding on to power, no matter what the consequence is. That's why we're going to beat Donald Trump, and that's why I will not stand for what Benjamin Netanyahu is doing to Israel. I love Israel. I want to defend Israel. There you go. That's what you say. Terminally online leftists are going to lose the election by sticking to their morals and not voting against the dictator. Shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up. There's an active genocide going on, and it's only being done with our weapons. And the guy most responsible for it, is literally in the pocket, in the tank for Donald Trump. He wants Donald Trump to win. This is an issue that you can tackle on partisan grounds. You're going to Michigan, a state with the largest amount of Arab voters, Muslim voters in general. They have friends that are also pro-Palestine. They have family members that are in Gaza. It's ridiculous to just drop that on a dime, not even have any kind of counter message on it. How are you so hopped up on your own farce that you think that like ain't nobody's gonna bring this up? You're right there. You're right next to Dearborn. The uncommitted campaign has been talking about doing counter protests. This is going to come up in the DNC too. Remember what I said? Politicians need to earn your votes. How many motherfuckers do you know that are like, no, America has to keep continuing Israel's genocide? The majority of Americans want a ceasefire. What real people-backed power does the pro-Israel ticket have? Nothing. All of the people who are unconditionally pro-Israel, no matter the cost, are already in the deep red South, and they're evangelical Christians at the heart of the Republican constituency. The real die-hard voters who will be like, this is the issue that's the most important to me, they're voting for the Republican Party. They're evangelical Christians. They're in the deep South. There's no downside to adding up pressure to Israel on the ceasefire. Biden, who is the most rabid Zionist that you've ever met, has put together a 3-phase ceasefire negotiation with a permanent end to hostilities. That was 3 months ago at this point. Israel last week killed the principal negotiator on the Palestinian side. Even if it doesn't cook your campaign in the way that you think it might, in the way that you don't foresee it happening because you have so much momentum, this is already a lost cause ultimately. I've said foreign policy, this is an American cliche, foreign policy is never top of mind in American politics in an election cycle until it's the only thing that people talk about. There are no assurances from Benjamin Netanyahu that this won't be the only thing that Americans talk about, especially considering his undying loyalty and commitment to Donald Trump. He flew to Mar-a-Lago after delivering a speech in front of a packed house. Got a standing ovation. What the did he do? He flew to Mar-a-Lago to meet Trump personally. When people yell at Biden, even he has the decency to at least be like, no, these people have a voice. Like, these people have a voice. Everybody quiet down. Like, come on. I hate the incredibly scared narrative, like well, AIPAC will come after her. Like, what are we talking about, dude? Like, a foreign lobby that gets to operate on U.S. soil has that kind of juice? Like, what do you mean? What is this narrative? This is the United States of goddamn America, man. Okay, then you actively should be like, we're registering AIPAC as a foreign lobby tomorrow. That's the reality, bro. Cory Bush just lost and you're saying that. What the are you talking about? What do you mean? We have to triangulate around a foreign nation that is literally a welfare state that would not exist without our unlimited billions of dollars of funds? The are you talking about? I'm asking her to reiterate her commitment to a position that this administration has put forward, chatters. I'm simply saying reiterate your commitment to a permanent end to hostilities that your administration has put forward that you have championed, supposedly. She had all the smoke to leak to the media months ahead of time that she actually wanted to say permanent ceasefire, and the Biden administration changed their narrative. I mean, I'm one of the people. I'm one of these people that has taken a wait and see approach, hoping maybe with too much copium that like they will be smart enough, because they've been pretty smart on a lot of stuff, that they'll be smart enough to make the right calculation and to know that if you're 10 miles from Dearborn, Michigan, the largest American Arab population, largest American Muslim population in the nation, that you would at least have one line about Gaza. It's like the moment that Tim Walz went on Morning Joe and said Republicans are weird. Before that moment, Democrats would hate that. They would be like, oh, they're deplorable, they're fascist. They'd never say something like that because they'd be too afraid. Just like Democrats, liberals have a tendency to be too afraid of change. That's why they were afraid to switch out the ticket with Kamala Harris. They were afraid to switch out the ticket with Kamala Harris because they're always running on the worst instincts. They're running with fear. But looking at the numbers, looking at the polling, looking at everything, it's obvious that you stand to gain from taking a stance like this instead of just hoping that it goes away when the entire region is dialed to 11. 4,000 Marines in aircraft carriers have moved around the peninsula to take a defensive posture for Israel. 51% of Americans think that that is unacceptable, by the way, or 54% of Americans. The majority of Americans do not want American soldiers to die defending Israel. If you do not think Americans care about foreign policy, why do you think the White House's position on Gaza is a potential election loser, especially when both parties line up on policy? Oh, easy. Michigan and Minnesota. Now you got Waltz, but so Minnesota is locked down regardless. But Michigan, there's also a way to cut into the momentum. Okay, the emperor has no clothes moment that happened for Joe Biden will happen with Kamala Harris. This is the start of that panic. Do you understand? This is the start of that panic. It has been rosy as hell for the past 48 hours, 76 hours. All of a sudden, obviously, issues are going to start coming up. The Republicans are going to get their shit together. They're going to be able to potentially launch a successful campaign strategy at a certain point, right? You have to be ready for that. You can't be just like flexing on all of the momentum that you've built up by being not Joe Biden. There's also then my own personal moral conviction on the matter. I think it's utterly repugnant to not even address it, you know, but I rarely ever bring that up because I know many of you don't give a shit about that because you're only enjoying the show because most people in America that care about politics understand the powerlessness that most Americans feel and therefore simply tackle the issue on team sports. Before a rally in Detroit, VP Kamala Harris spoke briefly with the co-founders of the Uncommitted National Movement, which mobilized tens of thousands of voters in Michigan to withhold their votes for President Biden. Abbas Alioueh and Layla El-Abed said that they were in the welcoming line for Harris and Governor Walz and communicated to Harris that they wanted to support her, but the voters wanted her to consider an arms embargo to immediately stop the carnage in the besieged enclave. Harris listened to the stories of people in Michigan who have had dozens of family members killed in Gaza. The leaders asked to meet with her about the embargo request, and she indicated she was open to it and introduced the two leaders to her staff. What are you doing? What are you doing? Why won't you just say it then? Not that, but just say you are committed to a ceasefire. That's it. Bro, what's wrong with that? That sounds like a good thing. It is, but it also shows that she's just so bad at campaigning. Just the one aspect that has been unique about the Democratic Party this past month is that they are no longer incompetent. They're not whiffing. That is incompetence. You meet with the uncommitted campaign, she needs to come out with a statement, dude. Look, what are you doing? Just go out and speak. That way it's a double win. You get the talk to the media, which is something that the Trump campaign keeps trying to harp on. Person also happens to be a war criminal. It's the easiest W of all time. Couple things that the Democrats should never do ever again. Are you ready? Number one, if you don't vote for me, you're gonna die. So shut the up and vote for me. Literally never do that on any issue. It is the dumbest way to try and change people's minds. The only people that agree with you are people who are voting for you anyway. It is electoral poison. It's poison. That's what Hillary Clinton did. Number two, don't tack to the right on any issue because they are obviously much better equipped at whipping up votes for that specific issue. Don't do that. Democrats were doing that on the border. They did that where crime this past month was filled to the brim with Democrats not doing that and actually getting hundreds of millions of dollars in fundraising and like hundreds of thousands of people signing up to door knock. Why would you cut that momentum? Why wouldn't you just keep going, keep pumping? You go back to the woke scold you're cooked. You tack to the right, you're cooked. They're going to call you radical anyway. Stick to the message, stick to the policies and say, you think this is radical? You're weirdo. And last but not least, and they haven't done this yet, and I'm very happy that they haven't done this. If you don't vote for me, you hate black women. Hillary Clinton did that all the time. That is, again, electoral poison. Everybody hates that. Literally not a single person is like, you know what? You're right. I guess I don't hate black women, so I should apologize and learn from my mistakes. If you do that, you will lose. And Kamala Harris, to her credit, has not done that once. Republicans will be like, she's not a real black woman. She's a DEI candidate. She doesn't deserve it. Not once does she address that because that's smart. Don't address it. Let them look like fools. And if you're ever going to tie it back to identity, be like, yeah, it's not shocking that the party that wants to stop women from getting health care, wants to stop women from getting a medical procedure, are going to say shit like this because they're weird and gross. That's it. Either let people draw their own conclusions, or if you're ever going to bring it back to identity, tie it back to a policy that you are fighting for. Like, look, this is what Biden did when people were yelling at him. And they yelled at him all the time, by the way.
No. Folks, it's okay. Look, they care. Innocent children have been lost. They make a point. Come on.
Like, he's the guy who's killing the children, dude. Come on. Kamala Harris is supposed to be the person who can break away from that stink. I told you in that moment on that campaign stage, she says, we're not looking back. We're going to the future, right? We're looking at the future. We're not repeating the mistakes of the past. That is also mistakes of the Biden administration. She literally actively says, we're going to fix inflation. Inflation is still a real problem. She is separating herself from Biden's biggest weakness. And she knows that that is good. That is good for the election. She needs to do that for Gaza too, to a certain degree. Uncommitted is not the end all be all though, not to be snarky. What do you mean? The uncommitted campaign is one of the most significant ways in which voters have been able to get their wills across. I just wish for a better tomorrow, just like so many things that were completely and utterly impossible, that so many of these chatters said would be impossible to happen. Biden dropping out of the race, Kamala Harris being swapped for the ticket, that not actually having negative consequences for the election, but actually unimaginably positive consequences for the election. Kamala Harris picking a pretty solid vice presidential pick. All of that stuff was seemingly impossible, and yet it happened over the course of a couple weeks. At no point did I say you should stop the pressure. Without glazing you too hard, since you've been right about a lot, do you think she will come out harder for a ceasefire? I hope so. I don't know if she will. It doesn't seem like it. I think she is very malleable, and I think someone in her corner needs to convince her that this is the smart thing to do. But this is also an issue that terrifies Democrats to the core, because it's not just Israel, which is hot button in and of itself, because there's like a litany of different counters that you will immediately be stuck with, like how anti-Semitic you are. It's all anti-Semitic. It's anti-Semitic. I hate that shit so much. But beyond that, there's also going against American foreign policy. Like, that's a thing that you can't do. Like, it just, no one ever goes against American foreign policy. It's bipartisan. It requires courage. It requires to take a leap. I'm trying to explain to those who are listening that this leap in this circumstance is actually one of the few instances where there's enough evidence that it would not take much to take. It would only have benefits and no negatives. No negatives. Ain't nobody in the Rust Belt is going to be like, oh, wow, you want a ceasefire? That's it. I'm voting for the other guy. It's like, hey, we recently got unionized. It's sick. I'm kind of riding with Kamala Harris. But honestly, her position on wanting to end the war in Gaza has made me reconsider everything. That's not a real human. No one in Alabama is voting like that. No one in the Rust Belt is voting like that. Those guys are already voting for the Republican Party. If anything, you're bringing more voters in to the party's base, because there are plenty of people that look to the situation and go, this is unconscionable. And they're right there in Michigan too, which is why it blows my mind that she didn't have a single line about Gaza. Who was writing the campaign speeches? Only 2.5% of Michigan is Muslim. Brother, do you know how many voters that is? There are more than 200,000 Arab and Muslim voters. More than 200,000 Arab and Muslim voters in Dearborn. They have friends. They have family members. They have people that also care about them, that they can sway away. You had 100,000 uncommitted voters in the Democratic Party's primary. You are delusional if you think that that does not matter. Where are the liberals right now? Hillary Clinton lost because of 13,000 votes in 4 states. Hillary Clinton lost because of 13,000 votes in 4 states. That's 100,000 voters in the primary. Biden won Michigan by literally almost the same number of total voters that voted in the primary against Biden. Real uncommitted voters don't even vote in the primaries. This is just uncommitted voters that are in the pocket of the Democratic Party, that were committed to the Democratic Party, that want to make a message to get the Democratic Party to change its stances. Is it possible Kamala's acting like she's playing down the middle to not lose Jewish voters? Dude, what are we talking about, dude? What? Oh my God, this is not a real calculation. Please be for real. One, not all Jewish voters are like 100% genocide in Gaza, or I'm not voting for you. And two, even if that was the fucking case, which it is not, even if that was the case, oh my God, do you think we're gonna lose California and New York? Where do you think the Jewish population is? This is not a real point of contention. The only difference is there's not a very big Muslim population in this country either. It's actually, I believe, smaller than the Jewish population in this country, but they happen to be in Michigan and they happen to be in Minnesota. That's important. Notice how I didn't bring up Florida, which is the third enclave with a high Jewish population, because Florida is deep red. So it doesn't matter. I think my favorite part about libs yelling at you is that they also yelled at you for saying Biden should drop out. They also yelled at you when you said they should pick out a progressive for VP. It's bad political instincts coming back. The temporary buff wore out. I know. That's the funniest part. Every single person that is like riding the Kamala momentum right now, we're like, can we really swap out Biden? Is America really ready for a black woman to run for president? That wasn't that long ago. That was a couple weeks ago. There'd be so much chaos, guys. Oh my God, the voters would hate it. They would hate it. It's untested. Remember that fucking cowardly instinct that you have inside of your soul every single time. Remember how wrong you were. Remember how good you feel now. And then listen to me when I say that there's a couple issues in this campaign that need to be sorted out. This is one of them. Most people, for the record, that are coming in here will perhaps be shocked tomorrow when like the media doesn't cover it as much, and this is like a minor blip or a mere disruption that will be cast aside, except it will not go away. It will keep growing and growing and growing. It scares me a little bit that they do not think that people will talk about this. Protests will get even worse when school comes back around, which subsequently happens to be during the election. Number one, this is only going to continue to snowball, especially with the protests of the DNC. There's going to be pro-Palestinian, anti-war, anti-genocide protests in Chicago during the DNC. And if the Harris campaign has no clear, coherent narrative on this matter, that specifically with real terms explains what she wants to do, is cooked. And then as this snowballs, the media will start talking about Harris's lack of interest in dealing with this. And then the Democratic Party, I fear, will do the same exact thing that they always do and start complaining about the leftist spoilers. This is a perfect ticket to lose. And not just Michigan, other states too. If you turn around and constantly left bash, you will lose this election. Right now, you have potentially Obama constituencies that you can activate, you can tap into. That means you have to stand on business. That means you have to be very clear about your progressive message. And the leftist spoiler narrative is the same as what Van Jones did the other night. Oh, anti-Semitism is the reason why Josh Shapiro didn't actually get selected. Boom! That was immediately seized on by the right wing. They're trying desperately to be like, Democrats are anti-Semitic, Democrats are anti-Semitic, Democrats are anti-Semitic. It's not going to work because obviously Republicans align with Nazis. But like the thing I'm trying to point to here is that the moment that the ship has holes in it, Republicans will try to seize on that. You have 90 days to win this election. If you spend any time on this, any time talking about, oh, I guess the left wants Donald Trump to win, don't do it. Especially, and I mean especially, this is very important, majorities, overwhelming majorities of Americans want a ceasefire. You stand to lose nothing, you only gain. You need to understand another thing here. Democrats, if they want to win, give assurances to how they will follow the agenda, show feeding kids isn't radical, call Republicans weird for their pathological obsessions on culture war, and then stick to kitchen table issues. Let them say the sexist and then tie it back to abortion restrictions, tie it back to policy. Now, what a lot of people are doing already is the classic scared narratives. You have this very real fear inside of you because you're a liberal and you're constantly used to losing all the time to these goddamn Republicans. So you do not understand. You're always running scared. Stop running scared. The very same thing I said about the Joe Biden swap with Kamala Harris exists in a firm commitment to a ceasefire. Denying weapons transfers to Israel with a firm commitment to a ceasefire literally is a popular policy. Let me tell you why. For a couple different reasons. One, is it not odd to you that Donald Trump and the Republican Party routinely try to act like they are now the anti-war party? Nobody believes it. We all know that's bullshit. But isn't it weird that Donald Trump keeps saying no new wars happened under my administration? Look at Joe Biden. He did Russia. He did Ukraine and Russia. He did Israel, Palestine. That would never happen with me. He's lying, but it doesn't matter. What matters is he ran as an anti-Iraq war candidate in 2016 and he won. What matters is his instincts are correct on this. Americans overall, by and large, don't care about foreign policy all that much. Foreign policy has the capacity to become the most significant part of the election. And at that moment, oh, God forbid. I mean, if that happens, you're regardless. And it can happen for this election. You never know what Benjamin Netanyahu, who is pro-Trump, might do at the fucking last second. You don't want that October surprise to be Benjamin Netanyahu doing something that makes 4,000 Marines in the 4,000 U.S. Marines to put their lives on the line for the nation state of Israel. That's number one. Number two, the majority of Americans, including the majority of the Republicans, want a ceasefire. That's insane. The overwhelming majority of Americans, including independents and the Democratic Party, want a ceasefire. Majority of Americans also believe that Israel is committing a genocide. Now, while Americans don't give a shit about foreign policy overall, and you can usually brush that aside and let business as usual take place, you have to understand something. Just like with the Joe Biden swap to Kamala Harris, you do not lose a single vote if you come out 10 toes down stating you want assurances, you want a permanent ceasefire. It's been on the for the past 3 months, no more weapons transfers. You say that, you don't lose a single vote. You say that, you gain votes. This election so far has dramatically changed. The calculation is dramatically changed. Biden was going to lose, and now Kamala Harris is most likely going to win unless she it up and starts doing that dumb shit. Oh, you're just privileged, and that's why you care about the literally least privileged people on the planet. The whole point is, as an American voter, I have a voice. As an American taxpayer, I have a voice. I'm supposed to have a voice. It's a democracy. What do you mean I'm privileged? Yeah, I am privileged to be an American, and as a goddamn American citizen, we are using our privilege to stop this genocide. Anyway, let's listen to Dearborn, Michigan Mayor on the uncommitted movement and Kamala Harris.
Group that has vowed to vote uncommitted in the election to protest the war in Gaza met with Harris after the rally last night, and they told CNN the vice president was was receptive. They said, quote, "It feels fruitful. We're hopeful that she will engage substantively with our request for an arms embargo that stops sending bombs to kill people we love." But Harris's national security advisor said this morning that she, quote, "does not support an arms embargo on Israel, but will keep working to protect civilians in Gaza."
That person is a vice presidential advisor and not a campaign advisor for the re-election campaign. That person is Kamala Harris's VP. Like that person is acting as a part of the White House when they say that. It doesn't matter.
Joining me now is Abdullah Hammoud. He is the mayor of Dearborn, Michigan, which is home to a large Arab American and Muslim community. Mayor, thank you so much for being with us. In the primaries, of course, an overwhelming number of Dearborn's voters chose uncommitted. It was 57% that voted uncommitted rather than vote for Joe Biden. First, I want to get...
Yeah, this is correct. This man is Biden's assistant and Harris's advisor in her capacity as a vice president. Pressure on Harris while she's campaigning to be president makes sense. It also makes sense to ensure Biden isn't forgotten. If the demand is ceasefire/arms embargo now, he is right now still president. That is precisely the reason why Phil Gordon's take on the matter is inconsequential in terms of like what the Kamala campaign will do. Do you understand? That's what I was trying to explain to you. This person, of course, is going to say that like the VP can't sidestep the president. Yeah. Also, the American liberal political history is long, has a long storied tradition of people with very real demands, very understandable demands that were also seen as impossible to achieve at the time, actually routinely disrupting protests. Dream Act protesters occupy Obama campaign office. Children of undocumented migrants would regularly disrupt the protests. Disrupt the campaign, sorry. They would do that for gay marriage, and they would do that for dreamers. They would do that for important moves in terms of civil rights and liberties for people that we now take for granted. Why? Because at the end of the day, in order for this to at least be a theoretical democracy, you still have to respond to nonstop pressure. So you have to keep exerting pressure. Let's continue.
Get your reaction to the vice president's response to those hecklers last night.
Yeah, I would have advised the vice president differently. I think what you have is people who are hurting, people who feel dehumanized. And I think in that moment, there could have been an opportunity to recognize the disenfranchisement that many voters, not only in Michigan, but across this country feel as it pertains to the genocide that's unfolding in Gaza. And what I'm hopeful for, though, is the opportunity to have constructive dialogue. We have seen Vice President Harris have some tough rhetoric following her private meeting with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And what we would like to see is that tough rhetoric paired with tough policy.
How would you describe how she responded?
You know, for me, I wasn't on the ground. I wasn't using far different words. I think it makes people feel more dehumanized and less seen. But again, I think what's most important here is to center the policy. Rhetoric only takes you so far, as we've seen with President Biden. And what we really want to see is what is the policy conversation that we can have? How can we have a new course on what's unfolding in Gaza? Because that is what is centered for so many Americans across this country. They want to find a pathway to end the killing of innocent men, women, and children. And that is the value and principle that we're leading with.
Y'all are forgetting a key aspect of this. And I think it's because the media rarely ever talks about the key aspect here, which is that actually bringing about a ceasefire would literally be so insanely popular. Like, what are we talking about, dude? This is something that the overwhelming majority of Americans want. I feel like I'm losing my mind. It's like 75% of Americans wanted Roe v. Wade to remain, and the Republicans decided to ether that, and they've been eating dick as a consequence of that decision since the Supreme Court did it. And y'all somehow forget that, like, popular decisions lead to popularity for the candidates, and unpopular decisions lead to unpopularity for the party and the candidates. Why are we just discounting that? This is from May 8th. 7 in 10 U.S. likely voters support a permanent ceasefire and de-escalation of violence in Gaza. 7 in 10. Majorities of Democrats at 83% by May. Independents at 65%. Republicans at 56%. This is in May. Majority in the U.S. U.S. now disapprove of Israeli action in Gaza. Approval has dropped from 50% to 36% since November. This is back in March. This is another poll. What are we doing? This is not a controversial position. This has higher approval ratings than America's dealing with Ukraine and Russia, dude. If they start eating away at the momentum, which things like this will inevitably eat away at the momentum of the campaign, they'll land on the worst instincts that Democrats historically and notoriously land on. Majority of Biden voters oppose weapon shipments to Israel, poll says. The poll comes as Israel's military offensive in Gaza has become a political albatross for the White House. This does not necessarily mean that this will be their only decision maker. I'm not saying that at all. It's far from the most significant issue in the minds of Americans, because Americans don't give a shit about foreign policy, as I have repeated time and time again. America's responsible for 69% of Israel's weapons. 69. It ends tomorrow. Polls suggest there is less downside on Gaza than one might expect. A Democrat who is soft on Israel, as Biden is seen as having been, loses support on the left, but a candidate who takes a more critical line wins those voters back without losing votes among moderates. Exactly. Why haven't they done it yet? Because they're bad. What do you mean? I think you guys are just paying attention to politics for the first time or something. Democrats are bad. They're not very good at campaigning. They're not very good at doing politics in general. Republicans, on the other hand, used to be very good at doing politics. They're not anymore, but they used to be. Democrats are very feckless. They're cowardly. They don't like to make risky decisions. They don't like to make good decisions. They don't like to run good campaigns. This past month was not the norm. It was the exception. This past month of decisions that were bold, that responded to legitimate public pressure, was actually unique for the Democratic Party. You cared about the uncommitted campaign way before the Podjons who dismissed it? Yes, they were wrong on that front too.
And from a policy perspective, based on what I'm hearing on the ground from thought leaders across this country, as well as from my constituents, they want assurances. And an offensive arms embargo is one of those assurances that we believe have to be enacted in order for us to get to a just Palestinian state. The reality is we can no longer go back to the status quo. It no longer exists. We have to find a pathway forward in order to ensure that the Palestinians have the right to self-determination, and that includes a just Palestinian state.
Without that, would you vote for Harris?
I think based on what I'm hearing from my constituents on the ground, and I take my lead from them, there has to be assurances on how we actually move forward and course correct on this issue. We have seen with President Biden talks of ceasefire now for several months that have not led to any outcome. And so we have to do something differently.
It's such an easy narrative, man. That's what's so frustrating about this is like Americans are so delusional and so self-interested and just like can't even understand what's going on and like don't give a shit. And then they act like an electoral W, okay, the easiest one to grab, is like actually such a hard deal. It's not, man. There's no domestic policy where Americans would be like, yeah, 75% of people want to protect abortion rights. But like, honestly, what if the evangelicals don't vote for Kamala Harris? Like, that's what you sound like.
The ICJ. We have seen the UK suspend arms sales. And so I think we can follow their lead in upholding international law in order for us to take a step forward and chart a new course on what's happening across the Middle East.
You know, talking to some Democratic operatives, I think there may be a calculation that if the option is Harris versus Trump and Trump's policy on Israel, that voters right now who oppose the Biden-Harris approach to Israel are still going to hold their nose and vote for them.
There you go. Lesser evil voting. You can never rely on that. That's a bad calculation. I don't think that the Democratic Party understands it. Please don't do this. Please don't think that the lesser evil voter. Oh my God. No, you can't do that. I'm losing it. I'm losing it. Lesser evil voting especially doesn't work in this situation because the Democrats are doing the evil. Lesser evil voting is one of the biggest electoral poisons that has rotted the Democratic Party's political instincts and is so unimaginably toxic. I hate it. It is a massive failure. Bro, you literally have not contradicted yourself once. I don't know why people are being so whiny and condescending, because there is a smugness and an entitlement and an arrogance to liberals that is genuinely pathological and gross to anyone that's not firmly committed to the Democratic Party. And they just cannot stop smelling their own farts. They have to be so condescending. They have to come in here and always be like, you've contradicted yourself. I got you. It's like they're just as cultish as the average MAGA loyalist, but because they have like better education than the average MAGA loyalist, they think that they're coming at this from an intellectual perspective. Okay. It is so genuinely off-putting.